Hello, Facebook live stream viewers, and hello to those who are listening to this on audio. This is Paula Shaw, and you are joining me here now for Light Your Way to Health and Wellness. And we are going to be talking about a topic again today that I think is really serious. Very, very serious. Since last weekend, I have become passionate about sharing this information with you because I have a feeling that, like me, many of you are parents who were not really well informed about what happens when we medicate our children. Actually, probably a more proper way to say this is what happens when we over-medicate our children. It can be devastating for them and for their lives, and we need to know what the facts are. Today, I really want to be talking to you, and I'm using a lot of notes today, which I don't usually do, but I want to be sure that I give you the straight facts, because that's what we need as parents. If we're going to make informed decisions, we have to have the facts. Now, today I want to focus particularly on bipolar disorder, because that and ADHD are the two disorders, and for those that don't know, that's attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. Those are the two disorders most commonly medicated for. And it often starts with stimulants given to the hyperactive child. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but stimulants given to the hyperactive child in adolescence tend to cause agitation, and so they exacerbate the normal moodiness, the outbursts, all those things that can happen in adolescence, which, by the way, are all a normal part of development. So let's look at what the problem is. I'm actually going to be giving you a lot of information from a doctor named Lawrence Kelmanson. He has been a psychiatrist for 32 years. He's a graduate of Cornell. He was the medical director at Craig Home Hospital in New York and is now in private practice. This man really opened my eyes to this incredibly complex problem that gets created when we turn to meds as a first line of defense with our children. So, as I was saying, many of the things that, hey, I was a parent of teenage children also. I know, I mean, we all used to joke about whether or not we were going to be able to live through our kids' teenage years. Everybody knows it's a tough time. But let's remember, it's a really stressful, tough time for the adolescents. They're going through social relationship pressure, the normal natural rebellion from their parents, because it's a time when they're supposed to individuate. So they have to think you don't know what you're talking about, because it's normal and natural for them to figure out what they believe, what they think is right and what they think is wrong. So they rebel against us. They think we're full of it. I remember it well. They're also going through changing bodies, hormone changes, and worries about their future. So all of this creates stress. It can create anxiety. It can create mood swings and outbursts and fighting. It can create all those things. It's a kind of a roller coaster being the parent of a teen at this stage. But that's all pretty normal and natural. And the problem really began. Now, my children were in their teens in the 90s, the end of the 90s, moving more into 2000. Let's say 95. Yeah, the end of the 90s. And right at that time, changes in the DSM, I believe it was the DSM-3 at that time. And by the way, that's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that people in mental health use to give a diagnosis to a patient. And we use that for turning into insurance companies so people can get payment, and also to look at what is prescribed for a specific diagnosis. So in the 1990s, the criteria for bipolar disorder was expanded. And the result of that was that these normal, natural outbursts and mood swings now became seen as symptoms of illness, more specifically bipolar disorder, which prior to that had been manic depression, which was looked at as an episodic kind of a disorder. But now bipolar disorder became this expanded experience, or this expanded disorder. And all of these symptoms that we used to think was just the terrible teens now were symptoms of an illness, of a disorder. And what was the result of that? Well, let's medicate them. Let's give them medicine to help them with this disorder. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids had already been medicated in childhood for their ADHD, which was a stimulant. Well, now you get to teenage years, and that stimulant that was calming for the ADHD child now produces aggression. It aggravates, it exacerbates those symptoms that were the normal, natural things that our terrible teens did. So we get medication. And these medications, particularly the stimulants, are addictive. And then when they go away, oftentimes depression results and children become suicidal. So you see there's this downward spiral that can evolve. And I have to tell you, I was a school teacher in 1972 through 75 or 76. And there were maybe one or two children who were going to the nurse's office to get their medication for their ADD. Now there's a line. There are many, many children. And I was really distraught to find out they're starting to medicate toddlers. I have no idea why that is the case. The only thing I can think of is more and more toddlers are in preschool because of working parents. And if they are normal, natural, hyperactive, running around and wanting to do things, it makes it more difficult for teachers. So maybe more and more people are looking at, oh, they're hyperactive, let's get them medicated. But I mentioned in my show the other day that in 2014, they estimated that over 10,000 toddlers were medicated. 10,000 for their normal, natural enthusiasm and need to run and burn off energy and all that stuff. All right. So this combination of this bipolar diagnosis and these kids being on basically speed for their ADHD has led to a 40-fold increase in bipolar disorder children. That's how many more times now the diagnosis is coming up. And here's the problem. And a lot of this was brought to my attention the other day. I mentioned to you all that we're going on Tuesday's show, we're going to be interviewing an amazing young woman who has quite a story to tell about the 16 years she spent numbed by medications and what it did to her life. She is now totally off all of them at 31, but feels that she missed ages 16 through 31 of her life because of the medications. And that's what's got me fired up right now and wanting me to help educate you so that we don't create more children like the one that you're going to meet next Tuesday. Well, she's no longer a child, now she's a young woman. But so what happens is once these kids get a diagnosis, then a couple of things happen. They change in their own minds. They change the way they look at themselves. Now they see themselves as broken, defective, ill, maybe permanently ill, unable to be normal. So their self-esteem and their self-confidence plummets. They become less likely then to try to manage their wild emotional swings and their aggressive urges. And they fall into a mindset of, well, I can't help it. It's part of my illness, or maybe the meds aren't working today. And the unfortunate thing is, parents also shift the way they're looking at these kids. So instead of looking at a situation that they need to step into, instead of accepting the normal, natural attitude that adolescence is difficult and challenging, but we need to be in there. We need to form these little humans of ours and help them cope and become happy, productive people. But instead, now the parents' mindset is also shifted. Instead of looking at what their kids are doing as normal adolescent issues that they have to deal with, they too start thinking, oh boy, chemistry's really off today, or the meds aren't working, or he must have forgotten a dose. It becomes a completely different mindset. And so bad behavior, or that which should have been intervened on, begins to be looked at as a part of the illness, and it begins to be more acceptable. So we're not stepping in the same way. We're not giving the same consequences. We're not having the same expectations for appropriate behavior of these kids because we're looking at them as ill. And the kids very quickly realize, things have shifted here. And it may not even be conscious, but they do realize that instant gratification is more likely, that they don't have to really learn self-control, that they can let themselves do inappropriate, disrespectful things because they realize these are being looked at as symptoms of their illness, as normal, natural behaviors that are coming from the illness. And if they believe themselves to be different, to be broken, to be have this disorder, their life experience becomes so different too. Their expectations for their future now have a very low ceiling on them. Their hopes and dreams change and shift. They're just trying to get through the day. And this isn't even taking into account any of the symptomology that may be coming from side effects. And remember, we are giving these children drugs that are impacting their brains, which aren't even fully formed yet. So you see, on so many levels, we are robbing our children. We're robbing them of the opportunity to learn appropriate conflict management skills, how to handle their frustration and their stress in productive ways. We're labeling them sick, therefore excusing what we shouldn't, and now robbing them of the normal, natural maturation process. And unfortunately, those drugs that they're giving or that they're taking are actually making all these things more difficult. As I said in the beginning, Their ADHD medication could now be causing them to be aggressive. Those stimulants create aggression in such an effective way, Hitler gave them to his army to make them more aggressive during war. Now we're giving them to our children, and then we're horrified at what we're seeing. So let's talk a little bit about what's a better way. What can a parent do? What are some other ways we can try to handle these situations? Okay, first of all, if you really believe that meds are necessary, if perhaps your child is very suicidal, talking a lot about it, unable to see any reason to stay on, in your own mindset and in what you share with your child, make the meds a temporary thing. This is not going to be a way of life. This is something to help you through this rough patch. And at the same time, you must be including therapy. Therapy, one-on-one therapy, perhaps group therapy as well. You need to have circumstances in which this child is now learning coping skills, where this child is learning to look inside and see what's going on inside, and in growing their interpersonal understanding and their interpersonal skills. We need to help them get in touch with their feelings, vent, and resolve the problems. These are the normal, natural things that kids are supposed to learn how to do in their teenage years. And that's what parents were always kind of planning to do before. But remember what I said, that mindset can shift once your child is diagnosed and medicated. So instead of looking at your child and saying, hey, what's going on? Let's talk about this. What's the problem? Sitting down, teaching them some coping skills, giving them some advice, listening, just hearing them out, loving them, hugging them, assuring them that you will always be there and that your love will always be there. These are the kinds of things they need, along with consistent boundaries, good, strong boundaries, consequences, discipline. This is what helps young people curb the wild urges and the aggression and learn how to be great people. Learn how to care about others in their world. Learn that they are not the only ones who matter. These are important skills if we want to turn out the kind of adults that we all love and admire. And so we don't want them to miss their opportunities to do that. This can be a really important time to build your relationship with your child. This can be a really important time to show your child you are there for them, no matter what. But if they miss that opportunity because you're busy and you chalk it off to, well, they didn't get their meds, hopefully tomorrow will be a better day, they're going to miss that experience. So that's number one. That's a really, really important thing. Diet really matters. Let's don't be giving them too much sugar. Let's make sure they get a lot of good vegetables. That's really important. Exercise, critical, especially if a child's in a kind of a manic state and has got a lot of aggression or energy going on. Get them a punching bag, get them out there on a bike or on a run, get them into a sport that helps channel some of that energy and that aggression. That can be really critical. Yoga, meditation, these kinds of things. Yoga is such a fabulous way of quieting, but there's still movement and purpose, because for a lot of kids to sit still and have to have a blank mind for 20 minutes would be akin to torture. A lot of adults can't do it. But when you've done postures, when you've actually walked through a yoga practice, then if you lay down at the end for Shavasana, I believe it's called, then it's natural. You've used some energy, and to quiet yourself actually feels pretty good. That can be huge. One of my colleagues, who is a doctor, finds the Eon patch, which I've talked about before here, that AEON, it's made by LifeWave, and I'm sorry I don't have a sleeve right here to show you, but putting that Eon patch on the back of the neck, I often do this in sessions. If somebody comes in really agitated, no matter what the age, I will just take that little round patch, which looks like a little white Band-Aid, and I put it right here on the C7 vertebra. And it is anti-stress, anti-inflammatory. It calms the anxiety. It just calms. It's a wonderful, natural way. My colleague uses it with her adolescent child, and it works very well. And she tends to be very prone toward anxiety, this girl. And that patch really helps her to quiet down, to sleep, and to set the anxiety aside. There are no drugs and chemicals in those patches. That's why I'm so excited about them and why I talk about them all the time. And again, if you want to learn more about the patches, private message me here on this Facebook page, or you can go to my website, lifewave.com/safe health. And if you take a look there, you'll also learn about these patches that work through a process called phototherapy, which uses light to create specific responses in the body. No drugs or chemicals. They are not transdermal. They will not impact anything else that your child is taking or doing. So I'm very, very big on that as another possibility for coping. Another thing that I think is so important these days that we know more and more about are supplements and nutraceuticals. So to reduce mania, it's very helpful to give the child chelated minerals. Those can be very helpful. I don't know of a specific brand that I would recommend. I personally take trace minerals that are liquid, but that might be something you want to investigate. L-tryptophan is another great way for calming. Magnesium. I take magnesium every day. It's a great calmer. Folic acid, as long as your child can methylate folic acid. You want to be sure you look into that. And brain chain amino acids can also be a natural, helpful way of calming aggression and anxiety and hyperactivity. To reduce depression, something that they found to be helpful is N-acetylcysteine. That's N-acetylcysteine. Again, chelated vitamins and minerals, really important. Omega-3s, very important to help alleviate depression. You know, I had a client at one point in time, and oh my goodness, he had gone from what seemed to be a totally normal, happy, healthy, successful man to this person who could not sleep. He could hardly eat. He was in this constant state of ruminating anxiety. He was regretting every major decision he'd ever made in his life. He was totally unable to function. And fortunately, his wife took him to a naturopathic doctor who tested his neurotransmitters. It's a simple saliva test, tested the neurotransmitters. 2 of his neurotransmitters were very low. And after 3 days of amino acids, which she prescribed, totally natural, he was completely back to normal after having been off the chain for 3 months. So, I mean, I want to say to everybody out there, first line of defense, get those neurotransmitters tested. Find out. I had another friend who was having some really huge depression and ruminating anxiety issues, and it turned out he was being poisoned by B vitamins because he couldn't methylate them. So please, 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 folks, look into these things before somebody puts your child on drugs that will alter their brain development, alter their self-concept and self-esteem, and perhaps change the rest of their life. It's that serious, guys. I've really been reading up on this, and the statistics are staggering. The number of children that are medicated today versus in the 90s or the 70s. I don't think we have this outgrowth of children with huge brain issues that are suddenly different from the children of the 70s and the 50s and the 90s. I think we have diagnoses that are broader and that are encompassing what we used to call normal, natural, bad behavior from teenagers. So I hope this has opened your eyes and enlightened you and helped you to think about things in a little different way. Get on Google. Look and see what else is working for kids. Let's see what we can do in terms of what we feed them, what we say to them, how we love them, what we encourage them to go after. Give them goals, give them sports, give them other ways to feel good about themselves. Let's don't numb them. Let's don't turn off that natural vitality and excitement about life that is normal and natural for them in adolescence. It's a huge job, and believe me, it's more challenging to work through these things with your children than it is to give them a drug that kind of numbs them out and now they're quiet in the other room. But we got to think long term. When you meet this woman who we're going to call Karen next Tuesday, she's 31, and she feels like she missed, like she wasn't even here for 16 years of her life, important years of her life. And now she's vibrant and brilliant and wonderful and an amazing, alive human being. She's what she always was meant to be. Let's give all our children a chance to be everything that they're meant to be. All right. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening. And if you found value in this information, please share it. We've got to get the word out to as many parents as possible. It's our kids' lives that we're talking about here. All right. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for Light Your Way to Health and Wellness at 11:30, when we will be interviewing Karen and you'll be hearing her amazing story. And by the way, that isn't her real name because, you know, I'm bound to protect confidentiality, but you will be amazed by what you hear. All right, everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.